Okay, hello everyone. Thanks for coming to my talk entitled Unglamorous-eSports. It's kind of a weird concept, so it's cool to see so many people here. Hope everyone's feeling fresh this morning and not too hungover or anything from last night. I'm Frank Elliott. I do community and PR at Tailwords Entertainment. I'm not a PR guy for this talk. It's not a PR exercise. This is me talking about something which has been a big part of my life for a number of years. Another thing I want to make clear for this talk as well is that it's not really about monetization or anything like that. It's just about healthy communities and how competitive gaming can be an important part of a healthy community, which obviously has benefits indirectly in all kinds of ways, including sales. But the focus is just about making a healthy community. Unglamorous esports, I'll talk about specifically what that is in a second. It's basically the pseudonym I've used for amateur esports, though. And I'm using Warband, our game, which we make at Tailwords Entertainment, Mount-Blade Warband. I don't know if anyone's played Mount-Blade at all. Some people, maybe. And how it's affected our game in a positive way. So, moving on to definitions then. Esports, a lot of people, when they think of esports, they think of these huge games like Dota 2, League of Legends, and the multi-million-dollar prize pools that they have, and the millions of people watching them all around the world. That certainly is esports, but that doesn't paint the whole picture. Esports, for me, it's where there's a meaning to the gameplay and a meaning to the result. So this can be anything from these huge big tournaments right down to playing a game of Street Fighter with a flatmate to decide who does the washing up. That's esports to me, because there is a context, there's a meaning to the game that you're playing. And in this case, for Mount-Blade Warband, it's somewhere in between. So it's not multi-million-dollar prize pools, it's not playing for who's doing the washing up, but it's tournaments which are online, people care about them, they put a lot of time and effort into them, but they're not monetized. People are not making money by playing our game. That's significant. That's also what makes it amateur, and in a sense, unglamorous. So, on to the goals of this talk. There's a bit of too much text on this slide, to be honest, but I won't be reading off the slides for most of the talk. Basically, what I want to do is present the value of competitive gaming in games, use how it's worked for us in Mount-Blade Warband, and try to give you some advice on how to be efficient in supporting your own competitive scenes and developing your own competitive scenes in your own games, and how you can actually benefit from that in ways which can be monetary, but often are not directly. Okay, so on to a bit of a history of competitive warband. I'm not going to go through everything that's happened in the competitive warband scene. That would take far too long, although I'd love to do that, perhaps at some point. I'm going to talk about some key points where I think there are relevant and useful examples, perhaps for other developers. What I do want to just say quickly now, though, is that the competitive scene for Warband has been active from its very start to the current day. And it's been very active throughout, and it's actually grown slightly, which I'm going to talk about later as well. So this is a screenshot from Mount-Blade Warband. As you can see, it looks nothing like an esport. This is one of my favorite screenshots from the game when it was released. I should actually say that I wasn't at the company when the game was released. I was involved in the competitive scene since it was released, but I was doing that from home as my hobby. I then turned that into my job and moved out to the developers in Ankara in Turkey 3 years ago to pursue this hobby even further, and that became my career, kind of by chance. Like avoiding going to university and getting a real job, I just went and did this. It's one of my favorite screenshots, but it looks nothing like an esport game. There's no fantasy elements, because there are none in our game. There's no sort of modern techno elements, which you often see in esports-themed games. You can see a bunch of characters there, and it's a single-player screenshot, and esports is multiplayer. Most people really see Mount-Blade Warband as a single-player game, which is kind of weird. I think a lot of people have a hard time accepting that games have strong communities and cores in both single and multiplayer, and so that's been actually one of the challenges of our scene, but we still have a competitive scene nonetheless. For those of you not familiar with the game, there's a quick video right now. Let's just start playing that straight away. This is actually a tutorial video made by someone called Reuploading on YouTube, and it's a beautiful way of showing how our combat system works, which is one of the unique appeals of the game that has kept the scene alive for so long. We have 4 directional attacks, which are controlled by the mouse. It's a PC game only at the moment. And you block an attack by choosing your direction, and you have to block in the right direction to avoid getting damage. If you block, you prevent all the damage you get as well. So you get these very intense, long fights. This is the tutorial that the game itself never really had, to be honest. Now, this second part, this is a competitive players dual grand final video. So you can see the players just like doing insane movements that make no sense to the untrained eye. I mean, you can't really understand anything which is going on about this at all if you haven't played the game. They're deliberately trying to look weird and confuse their opponents. And this is real time, this isn't sped up either. That's one of the sort of amazing things about esports, is how players will do weird things with your game mechanics. That can be very scary as a developer, but it's also very exciting for players to explore games and have different experiences in games by playing competitively. So at the very start of Warband, our competitive scene was formed in the beta. It was a 6-month beta. There was a lot of interaction with players and developers, and the game was being developed very quickly at that time. The smaller size of having a beta was one of the happy coincidences that helped form the competitive scene quite early on, because you would have players recognizing each other on the forums, recognizing each other in the game, and they would instinctively form into clans, and as soon as they were in clans, they would then fight each other straight away. So beta can be a really positive thing in actually helping your community to form from the start. This example now is of a very early tournament that we held in the scene called the Nations Cup 2010. We've actually held a Nations Cup every year. The interesting thing about this is that teams didn't play in their clans, they were forced to participate in their nations. That's a very good thing for people who aren't very involved in the competitive scene, because you immediately have a connection. You can support your own country, even if you're not playing, whereas if it's a clan, you don't really have much relation to what's going on there. So that's a very cool thing. But the tournament itself was a failure. The reason it was a failure is because there was terrible lack of foresight. 18 nations signed up, which is great, but the tournament format was an 18-team round robin. And for a round robin to work well, where every team plays each other, every team has to complete every single match, because otherwise the amount of points you're gaining is going to be uneven and unfair. This wasn't really considered, and so the tournament was started, and 5 weeks in, quite naturally, teams like, for example, Hungary, nothing against Hungary, it's a great country and they have a great community, but what happened was teams like Hungary and other teams, because they weren't really playing with people they were very familiar with, and they were sort of losing anyway, they naturally just dropped out, and then it caused a sort of sour environment. All the points had to be rearranged and everything, and results were going to nothing. It was a very bad way of planning a tournament. You have to account for these kind of things when you're thinking about these tournaments. And there was a quick solution, and there was also T-shirts promised from the developers that were never given, and that's still mentioned to this day as a bitter memory from this tournament as well. The one thing I want to mention about failed tournaments is that it's not the end of the world. Teams still played matches, they still had interactions with other players, and they still had a good time for a lot of the tournament. It's not worth panicking if a tournament in your game goes wrong. It can still have a lot of positive impact for players. Now, this is a really specific example. I'm going to give more general advice and examples later on in the talk, but I want to try and sell this as one of the interesting things that happened in our game, especially for me personally. Before we had really organized tournaments, what you would have is clans in our game would challenge each other, and then they would record these results on their threads, on their websites, and the results of these weren't streamed because Twitch wasn't really a big thing at the time, but the results would still spread as news throughout the community, and they would interact and they would explain what happened in their matches. Now, the 22nd Battalion was the best team in Western Europe. They beat my clan at the time. They had the best players. They played all the time, and they were really very good. They were unbeaten, in fact, in Western Europe. The Runaway Scorpions were from the Russian-speaking community. Communities can isolate in your games for multiple reasons, partly due to language barriers. Russian-speaking communities often will isolate themselves separately, and this can lead to unique game approaches. And I'm going to explain what happened in this game in the next slide. Runaway Scorpions, true to their name, basically just ran away. And the 22nd weren't ready for this. In Western Europe, what we were doing the whole time was we were focusing on these intricate melee mechanics, and because it was a melee game, the really important thing is to have all of your players really close together, which you can see. Yeah, this is the 22nd, grouped up here, close together, pushing towards the Runaway Scorpions players, who have spread out archers all around the map. Wherever the 22nd pushed, Runaway Scorpions would run away, send players around the side. And they completely thrashed the pants off of the 22nd, who was the best team in Europe at the time. And this kind of caused big sways throughout the community. Everyone was sort of asking about this clan, and the Runaway Scorpions did a sort of tour, beating all of the top European teams outright. And for me as a player, to see the game played in such a different way where teams were sort of avoiding the engagement and using sort of different tactics. It really was such a profound moment for me because I was getting, basically, when I look back at now, I realized what I was getting was new content in the game. It was like DLC that was made by the players, and it was more valuable than any DLC I've ever bought, to be honest, because I was suddenly experiencing something very different in a game when nothing about the actual game itself had changed. It was simply changing in the way that players were approaching it. That's called a meta game change in esports, and it's a common concept across all esports. So on to the Nations Cup 2011. What I want to mention here is this was the first tournament that I ran, and this was still before I joined the company. I was sitting in my room, claiming unemployment benefit and trying to avoid getting a job. And I ran a tournament for Mount-Blade Warband, which was super fun at the time, and still is kind of fun. What I did was I worked out how to use BB code, and it's a way of making these kind of like tables on forums. Give your players these opportunities. This is the easiest thing you can do as a developer. Give your players opportunities, give them HTML, give them, maybe not HTML, this can cause problems, but even some kind of basic HTML, give them a way to format the forums, and they will naturally be creative and try to make better layouts. Because this immediately, even though it doesn't look very good and there's bad spacing and all kinds of problems that I can see, it's better than pasting a JPEG, it's better than having an ugly looking forum, and your players will naturally work to try and make their tournaments look good, to sell them to other players, if you just give them platforms to do that. The European Native League. There's 2 points I want to make about this. This was one of the first big uniting clan tournaments that happened. I also ran it. And one thing that we did for the European Native League was add custom player-made maps. User-created content is hugely important for esports in general. I mean, there's one pretty well-known example in Dota 2 was just a custom map for Warcraft 3. If you can provide any way of giving enabling your users to create user-created content, you will often add longevity to your game, and they will come up with great ways to play competitively as well. And we also had a smaller team size. For our game, we have 8 players aside at the moment. You have a big advantage in esports if you play with 5 players aside, because there's already lots of infrastructure set up for that, and actually groups of players often play in 5s already. But for us, we still felt that the need to have 8 players because that adds extra things to our game. You know, it's always going to change with your game design. You may not have to go with the flow. You may have to just adjust for the nature of your game anyway. It doesn't make you unviable as an esport. You could have an esport with 20 players aside. I think it's totally possible, but it's obviously going to cause challenges. And the smaller your team size is, the less barrier to entry there is, because it's easier to form, obviously, a smaller amount of people and get them together to play a competitive game. Moving on, as streaming in Twitch basically developed in the larger esports, we also took this on board in our own community. And the players really responded well to this. They love having recordings of their own matches. They love watching other people playing matches. And it's a great way to get people fanaticized about the community. They're investing a lot more in the game, not just by playing it, but also by doing things around the game, by watching streams, by tweeting at each other about the streams and about the games. And I'm going to show you a few screenshots of how we use Twitch in our community. So this is what it kind of looks like to watch Mount-Blade Warband. Now, you may not understand anything that you can see here, but I'm going to go through a few of the elements and explain what was added as a mod, because our game is moddable, to make this game more watchable. So the only UI you have normally in the game is this. It's who's killed who. And then you can just see who's on the screen. And it's hard to tell who's on what side. You don't really have any good information when you're just in a normal spectator cam. It's fine when you're a player. You have like the information you need. But as a spectator, you have nothing. So we added in player panels to show who's on either side and how many are remaining, which shows how many are remaining on each team, a mini-map, the names of the teams, the scores, all these important things that you have to consider when designing for watchability. This was added as a mod for our game, but it's the kind of thing where if you add this as a developer, then you're going to give the chance for players to stream themselves, and that's going to obviously help you out because it's free promotion for your game, because they're showing your game to the world. And there's a lot of things like classes, like game-specific things here. You see infantry, archers, and cavalry. And some things like this are pretty cool as well. You can see the player's avatar is showing up when they've got a double kill. You see their name, and they're in a cool sort of folded arms pose, which makes them really want to try and get double kills in the game as well. Okay, moving on as well. This is a splash screen. This is what shows up in your game. or what streamers will use in natural breaks in your game or when you have technical difficulties, but there's always going to be breaks. There's not too much to say here from the developer side. You kind of have to trust your players to do it well, but if you can provide them templates or give them assets that they can use, for example, in the background, it's just a video. This is just a screenshot, but this is a video of the map itself moving around. Give your players assets, give your players templates so that they'll produce better quality content, and that's an efficient way of spending your time and supporting your competitive scene. Okay, this is an interesting slide because it shows we have an extra show for the game. So this is not showing the game itself. This is just people from the community. You see me up there in the office. So I have joined actually the company at this point. Me up there hosting the show. We've got players in there just talking to each other. And we found that actually the community finds this really engaging and really interesting because they're not just watching the characters of the players and they're not just seeing their names or what they write on the forums. They're seeing the people themselves. They see their face, they see them talking, they see their personalities. And it's just a really good exercise in adding narrative to your games because you don't just see LaRue, the good archer. You see LaRue, this Belgian guy who is a really interesting and friendly chap, and then you see him play the game as well. And you have this whole narrative which you then buy into and helps you invest more into the scene. And these are very, very simple to set up. It's just an overlay and a Skype call. Like, this is really, really simple to do. I don't perhaps recommend it doing for yourself as developers, but you can encourage your players to do this when you interact with them as well and suggest it. So just as a status report for Mount-Blade Warband, we actually have higher viewership on our streams than ever. The game was released 10 years ago. It's still watched more than ever now. If you manage a community or if you read your own forums, you will know that sometimes this happens in all communities. You get players who will come on and say, this game is dead, and I want to leave this game, and everyone else should leave this game, which is obviously a pretty negative thing. And so it's good to not have those. I think one of the things which actually helped stop that was an increase in developer interaction. When I joined the company, people felt more like they were connected to the developers themselves, and they stopped making these threads. Also, just the growth itself helped reduce this kind of negative activity as well. There's been a steady growth in participation, and also I want to mention about players thinking maturely. This is really important because now, instead of the players sort of just thinking very immediately about their own wants and needs, we have a scene which has matured over time, and players now consider much more about how the community should grow and how the community is doing in a broader sense. And so we have much more kind of positive response from players if we need to make changes or no matter what's happening through any sort of hardship in the scene. And that's a really good kind of attitude to try and encourage in your community. So these are Steam stats for Mount-Blade Warband. The thing that actually immediately catches your eye is this. This was our free weekend. This is not really related to, this is just because if you make your game free, people play it a lot. That's true, that's just a fact. And then we have some more detailed information here as well. These are actually just less detailed, but you can see basically over time, it's actually gradually grown over the years. I think, I mean, inevitably this is as a result of just having a strong community, and this is always going to affect sales. It's actually one of the top 30 concurrent games on Steam, and that's even including all the free-to-play games as well. There's been a slight dip lately when you've had, this is just because it shows more detailed data. I think this also might be just Rocket League, basically. It's slightly affected the number of players. Okay. And this is just a small graph where I show some of the major tournaments. This is the Nations Cup, this yellow line. What you have on the bottom is the start date of the tournament. So this is over time from 2010 to 2015. And this is the number of teams that were participating in the tournaments. So on the bottom you have the Nations Cup, where you have less teams because it's limited by the number of nations. Whereas the clan tournaments, we've seen fluctuation, but basically just a gradual increase in the peak of the number of players playing in these tournaments. And it's actually higher than ever in the most recent tournament we've had. So by creating a scene which is cool and fun, we're just growing. And that's, I think, very pleasing for me as a community manager. So why Unglamorous? Well, why go for Unglamorous-eSports? For developers and for players, this is kind of different. I'm going to go through that in this section. Playtime is super important. Warband has one of the highest average play times of any game on Steam. This was data released by Ars Technica in 2014, April 2014, and it's from March 2009. So Football Manager has the highest median hours of any game on Steam at that point, and Mount-Blade Warband is at a very, very respectable 10th place out of all the games on Steam at that time. Now, what you have with competitive players is an average which is not around 25, it's an average which is around 2,000 to 3,000 hours which they're playing on your game. So even with our spectacularly high average number of hours played, and my fairly low and conservative estimate, what we have is up to 80 times the activity given into your game by players that are invested competitively. And this can obviously go up into the hundreds depending on your kind of average hours in your game and how many players are playing competitively. So you can really, it's a really good way of just keeping your game very, very active, having lots of players on the servers, lots of players playing in the game, and they're also going to be obviously talking about the game as well, because it's going to be, that's their hobby, that's what takes over their life, if you can get them to invest competitively. Benefits to the players. Now, I'm not suggesting you con your players into playing competitively. That doesn't even work. It's not something you can possibly do. Players will play your game competitively because they get benefits from it as well. It's very, very fun to play games competitively. This is the most fantastic, amazing experiences that I've had playing games are playing competitively, because you're working together as a team. You're challenging yourself constantly, and it's just fun and enriching. You're sharing experiences with people from around the world. I know lots of people have learned English through our competitive scene as well, and developed other languages. I actually played with some Germans for a while, and I helped my German, although that's all kind of gone now. One thing about playing in an unglamorous meta scene as well is that players enjoy, it's about being a big fish in a small pond. You can have a lot more impact on a smaller scene if you, because there's less people. That's just a natural thing. That's nothing to be embarrassed about. It's not like, oh, it's a small scene, so they're getting like some extra good feeling which they don't deserve. It's just a cool thing about smaller scenes. Like, you can have more of an impact on them. Larger scenes have their own benefits as well, but that doesn't counter the fact that it's very cool to be in a small community as well. And there's also a concept called getting sold, which I think is really important. This is more related to the unique nature of your game. If you have something which another game can't offer, and this is up to game design, I can't tell you how to make an amazing esport game, I can just tell you how to invest in your community. But if you have unique elements in your games, like, for example, Warband has the combat system, and it has the unique way in which these different, very diverse classes cooperate with each other. If you can create unique experience in your game, that's going to help get your players sold, and it's going to help justify them investing time in your game, which is much above the average. I think this is the key area where you're going to get a difference between people playing for a couple of hours or a couple of thousand hours. Make your game interesting. And I think one actually important thing is, although I can't say how to design your game, I think a lot of these experiences come very naturally when you make a multiplayer game, which is competitive. Because playing together as a team is a very satisfying experience. So on to some actual direct advice. Make multiplayer for your game. Obviously, you need this. Obviously, you won't have an esport. Use your time efficiently, as I mentioned before. Provide tools for your players. Don't try and do all the work yourself. If you are a bigger team, you can try and hire a community manager. That's fine. We're very cheap, unfortunately for me. And just make sure that you can give your players the opportunity to work and invest in the scene themselves. Also, make sure your players can play properly. This should seem super obvious, but we have games, I've seen games where you have things like client-side hit detection, so players in Australia, when they come and play on European servers, will beat everyone, because on their game it seems like they're winning, and then that sends the data which gives them lots of kills, and it just basically ruins the game, because the game isn't properly played or designed. They don't have admin panels, for example, where players can arrange their matches. Make sure that you have these opportunities for your players, and just like pay attention to your players and what they need. Have a score, have a way of determining who is the winner in your game, because there are some seriously abstract games coming out right now. And monitor the situation. Make sure that you just pay some attention to the community. Don't open the floodgates and let everyone come and speak to you, because you just won't have enough time to do that. Try and contact some key members. anyone who's taking some initiative already to run a tournament, contact them, ask them what they need, ask them what they can help with. I invested 3,000 hours in the game before I had any contact with the developers before I joined the company. I didn't even think to contact them, which seems really stupid now. But if you want to support your scene, you make the first step. It's easy to find someone who's active on the forums and is organizing tournaments, someone who's leading a clan. Contact them, ask them what they need, and speak to them. Listen. Reducing barriers is a slightly different concept as well. This actually rolls around a number of different things. Like, for example, if you have custom maps, make sure that they get downloaded in the game itself. You don't want to have a situation where they have to download something specific and have all these kind of barriers to entry. Make sure they can find your forum easily, they can find the clan section easily. If you're going to make one, definitely make one if you want a competitive scene. And just try and ease the path from being a player into a competitive player. All right, and just in general, just listen to your community. So I hope you got something out of that. As I said, it's totally a weird talk, but like I said, I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you very much. Questions, if anyone has any, please feel open to ask me anything. Okay, yeah.
You mentioned the problem of watchability, and that looked really kind of strange when you showed the video of them fighting. Have there been any efforts to make the game more watchable for casual viewers or for a broader audience?
Well, I mean, the watchability point that I made was more about creating a UI which gives more information about the game. As for the actual game itself and the mechanics being watchable and understandable, no, they haven't, and that's a failure on our part. I mean, that's actually an important part of game design as well. You'll see certain games, for example, like StarCraft 2, will put a lot of effort into making sure that all of the mechanics, and also like MOBAs as well, all the mechanics are very sort of clear to see for the viewer. It's not actually ideal in our game. We're thinking of perhaps doing things for maybe our new games, but right now, no, we don't have that, and it's just a failure for us. One more question? Okay.
What do you think about coaching in esports?
Coaching in esports?
Like professional team coaches or just people in general who want to learn how to get better at the game?
You mean like sort of the coaches of professional teams, or like player-to-player coaching? Or?
I guess players, because there's more
player-to-player coaching.
Like, if someone wants to get into the pro scene of this and wants to know how to get better at blocking.
Right. We've actually set up a few initiatives like that in our communities. It's about, I don't know if everyone heard that, it was asking about coaching, player-to-player coaching in competitive scenes. We have like mentor systems in our game as well, so people who want to try and get initiated into the scene, we have player initiatives to sort of help them and give them advice on doing that. I think it's important and useful. It's very hard to sort of say to your players, do this, but you can certainly encourage them to do that. You can set up like platforms to help them coach each other. I think that's important. As for professional coaches, I think that's just a necessity which comes about by the fact that the competition is so high, so they really need to put all their time in and have someone organizing things. Hope that answers your question. Okay, that's everything, so take care. Have a nice conference.